Be independent, they said, right before slamming the door in my face. The wind outside howled through the narrow street, and the October rain clung stubbornly to the window pane like it had something to say. I held the envelope between my fingers like it was laced with poison, the heavy cardstock stiff and unyielding. There was no return address. Of course not. Cowards rarely sign their names when they send bombs. I hadn't seen my family in nearly a decade. Not since they told me I wasn't worthy of help because I'd made the grave sin of wanting a life they couldn't control. Not since they chose silence over love, reputation over truth. And yet, here it was, an invitation. A white crisp card with gold embossed letters. A celebration of holy matrimony. Emily Rose Hamilton and Dylan James Carter. I read the names 3 times before the burn in my chest found words. Unbelievable. Julian looked up from the kitchen island, wiping his hands on a towel. Everything okay? I turned the card toward him, like it might somehow make sense if he saw it with his own eyes. It's from them. Emily's getting married. He raised an eyebrow. Emily. Your sister? Emily. My half-sister. I corrected, voice tight. And apparently, she still thinks I give a damn. Lily giggled from the living room, her little voice rising over the hum of the fireplace. She was sprawled across the rug-coloring princesses with full concentration, unaware that her mother's history was being dragged back into the room like an uninvited ghost. Julian stepped closer, reading the invitation in silence. He didn't say anything for a moment, then set it down carefully. They want you there. They want me to witness it, I said, folding the card in half like I was severing a nerve. They want me to watch their perfect golden girl marry into success. All while pretending I never existed. I didn't have to say it all. He knew the history. How my parents had cut me off at 18 when I refused to stay home and become the obedient daughter. How I worked nights cleaning hotel rooms while finishing my degree in public health. How I built my catering company from scratch, one unglamorous tray at a time. Julian had met me after the worst of it, but some bruises don't fade. They just hide beneath the surface. Then don't go for them, he said gently. Go for you. If there's still a splinter in your heart, maybe it's time to pull it out. I stared out the window, watching raindrops race each other toward the edge of the glass. Part of me wanted to burn the invitation and never speak of it again. Another part, the part I had buried under spreadsheets and preschool pickup lines, leaned forward like a wolf catching a scent it remembered. That part wanted closure. Or maybe something else entirely. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled down the battered storage box I hadn't opened in years. The edges were worn, taped shut with layers of old shipping labels. I placed it on the coffee table and stared at it, heart thudding. Julian stayed quiet, sensing I needed space. Inside were fragments of a life that still throbbed beneath my skin. My acceptance letter from Columbia University, creased but proud. A tattered notebook full of quotes I used to write when I needed strength. The tape recorder. I hadn't touched it in forever, but I had kept it for a reason. I pressed the play button. You think you're better than us because you read books. You don't know how the world works, Claire. You never will. My father's voice, acid-laced and dismissive, echoed into the room. I pressed stop and tucked the recorder back into its compartment. Next to it, my framed degree, Bachelor of Science, magna cum laude. I ran my fingers over the glass. The ink hadn't faded. Neither had the rage. Julian sat beside me, his presence calm. You already won, he said quietly. I shook my head. Not yet. Not until they see it. We sat in silence as the rain whispered down from the sky. My daughter hummed a tune I didn't recognize, lost in her world of crayons and magic. And I made a choice I didn't know I'd been postponing for 9 years. I was going back. Not as the exiled daughter, not as the unwanted burden, but as someone they never expected to return. I closed the box and exhaled. Julian reached over and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, I've got your back. I gave him a small smile. I know. I stood holding the invitation between my fingers like a loaded weapon. There was a time I would have torn it to pieces. But now I saw it for what it was: not a summons. A trigger. Let them think I'm the same scared girl they threw out. I'll play along until the moment they realize I was never playing. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. Some houses have haunted hallways. Mine had haunted memories. Tacoma hadn't changed much in 9 years. The houses still crouched in tight rows like they were ashamed of themselves, and the sky pressed down with the same steel-gray glare that had once mirrored everything I felt living here. It wasn't the weather that made my knuckles stiff on the steering wheel. It was the way memory clung to each corner like a ghost that refused to be forgotten. "This town gives me the creeps," Tanya muttered beside me, tapping away on her iPad. She'd insisted on coming under the guise of helping with a potential catering partnership. But we both knew the real reason I was here: to see the battlefield before the war began. The Rose Hill Grand Hotel stood like a palace, pretending it wasn't built over a graveyard. Gilded pillars, ivory staircases, red-carpeted entryway. It reeked of new money trying too hard. I parked in front and watched as a valet scrambled outside in the drizzle. I didn't get out. Not yet. "I grew up 5 blocks from here," I said absently, watching the raindrops gather on the windshield. "I used to walk past this place thinking people like me would never be allowed inside." Tanya glanced up. "And now you could buy the place and rename it Clare Hill." I smirked, but it faded fast. We stepped into the lobby, and my senses were immediately assaulted: overly polished marble, synthetic florals, jazz music piped through hidden speakers. Somewhere in this ornate shell, Emily's wedding would be held. Somewhere behind these walls, my family would gather to celebrate, without remembering who they trampled to get here. The event coordinator greeted us with a practiced smile and a schedule I didn't bother to read. Tanya handled the formalities while I drifted toward the ballroom, heels clicking against floors too clean to feel real. A tall arched window gave a perfect view of the courtyard, where the ceremony platform was already being constructed. White drapes, gold chairs, a string quartet testing notes. Suddenly, I was 17 again, my mother's voice sharp and brittle. "You chose books over your family. You chose pride over obedience." Then Emily smirking at the top of the stairs, her words slicing through the air like glass. "Good luck in the real world, college girl. Let's see how far independence gets you when you're broke and alone." I blinked, and the ballroom was empty again. The string quartet paused. "Claire," Tanya called softly. I turned. She was holding her phone. I found the vendor list. It includes family RSVP details. Anything interesting? No obvious aliases, but the groom's name caught my eye: Dylan Blake. I paused, the name jarring loose a forgotten splinter. "Blake?" I echoed. "As in, Dr. Dylan Blake?" She nodded. "Apparently, he's an oral surgeon." Why, I exhaled slowly, my heart picking up a beat I hadn't expected. 3 years ago, I murmured Lily had a dental emergency. Our pediatrician recommended a specialist, Blake. We went to his office, and he barely glanced at her x-rays. Said she was fine, but I pushed for a second opinion. Turned out she had a cyst that could have damaged her permanent teeth. Tanya's eyes widened. "You think it's the same guy? Let's find out," I said, already imagining the folder I'd need to build. "Start digging into his practice. Licenses, complaints, school records. And while you're at it, check where Emily got her graduate degree. Something about that still doesn't sit right." She nodded, already typing. Any particular reason? I didn't answer immediately. I looked back out at the courtyard. "It's just a feeling," I said. "Like there's more dirt under this polished floor than they want anyone to see." We wrapped the venue tour with fake smiles and shallow compliments. Tanya played the interested assistant flawlessly while I took mental snapshots of every hallway emergency exit and camera angle. I wanted to know the terrain. I wanted to be invisible until I chose not to be. Back in the car, the rain had intensified. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. The hum of the engine was a lullaby compared to the riot in my chest. She's marrying that Dylan, the one who nearly misdiagnosed my daughter. Oh, this just got interesting. To them, appearance is everything, truth is optional. The Rose Hill Grand had transformed overnight. What was merely grand yesterday now dripped with curated elegance. White orchids cascaded from glass vases like they were plucked from a billionaire's funeral. Soft jazz swirled through the air, interrupted only by the gentle clinking of champagne flutes and the shrill laughter of people too wealthy to know shame. I adjusted the silver clasp of my navy wrap dress and stepped into the lion's den. Gasps didn't echo in this kind of room, but they rippled quiet and sharp like blades slicing through velvet. Faces turned. Forks froze halfway to mouths. In a corner, someone whispered my name like it was a curse returning to haunt the living. I smiled. My heels tapped across the marble floor with intention, each step measured, each blink slower than necessary. I wasn't here to cause a scene. Not yet. But I wanted them to feel the shift in air pressure. I wanted them to wonder how I got here, why I came. Susan turned first. Her fingers already wrapped around a flute of rosé tightened. Her smile bloomed, slow, painful, practiced. "Claire," she said, voice silked in surprise. "Darling, we didn't think you'd be invited." I finished, tilting my head. "Neither did I, but you know me, full of surprises." Paul stood next to her, stiff as ever, the kind of man who once believed eye contact was a power play. He didn't offer a hug or a handshake, just a flat nod. "Still dramatic," he muttered. And just like that, the years melted. I was 19 again, standing at the threshold of this family's curated nightmare, wondering how my blood could run so cold. From behind them, Emily emerged in a cloud of chiffon and smugness. Her dress clung in all the right places, her hair an elaborate display of control. She walked like she owned the air. "Claire," she beamed, arms outstretched in false warmth. "I didn't think you'd actually come. You know how awkward you get at formal things." I allowed her to air kiss the space near my cheek. "I wouldn't miss the spectacle," I replied sweetly. "And I'm so happy for you. Dylan seems charming." "Doesn't he?" she purred. "We're just thrilled. And honestly, no hard feelings. It's so nice to see you've found something to keep you busy. That little food thing you do, what is it, boutique hors d'oeuvres?" I blinked once slowly. "Crown and Hearth Catering," I corrected. "We're launching 2 new hospital contracts this quarter, including Seattle General." That did it. A crack in her perfect mask. Susan's smile faltered half a centimeter. Paul's brow twitched. Emily's eyes flared so briefly it could have been a blink. But I saw it. I stored it. Every micro-expression was a data point. We moved through the rehearsal dinner like 2 queens playing a silent game of chess. She flaunted her ring. I countered with calm confidence. She introduced old family friends with phrases like, "You remember Claire, don't you? She's in food now," as if I had taken up sculpting mashed potatoes in a basement. I smiled through every word. I didn't bite. Not yet. Tanya had once told me that letting a snake believe it's still in control was the best way to watch it tie itself into a knot. Midway through the evening, as guests toasted to eternal love and the shrimp cocktail dried under lukewarm lights, Emily leaned in beside me. Her voice was sugar-laced with arsenic. "Nice of you to crawl out from wherever you've been hiding," she whispered. "Still playing house with that fake business of yours?" I took a sip of my wine, tilted my head, and smiled. "Fake businesses don't get contracts with Seattle General. But I wouldn't expect you to know." I didn't wait for her response. I turned toward the bar and ordered something stiffer. That was the thing with Emily, she threw stones and expected no one to throw them back. But I wasn't her little sister anymore. I wasn't afraid of cracking porcelain. As I stepped away, I caught a glance at Dylan across the room. He had just returned from a brief conversation with Paul. A server offered him a drink, but he declined. His eyes found mine across the crowd. I hadn't spoken to him all evening, but I didn't need to. Something in his expression had shifted. When I mentioned Seattle General, his face had paled. Claire notices Dylan's face pale when he hears Seattle General. The dots begin to connect for someone. A family tree can look strong until you dig into the roots. The soft hum of the desk lamp was the only sound in the room save for the faint tapping of Seattle rain against the office windows. I sat alone at my desk, the cursor blinking on a blank document that was about to become anything but. An encrypted file blinked into existence on my laptop screen. Tanya's name appeared beside it with a timestamp 11:42 p.m. subject line confirmed. I clicked without hesitation. Inside scanned university transcripts, blank registrar statements, an archived social media photo of Emily in Cancun during what should have been her sophomore year at UCLA. She never graduated. There was no degree, no thesis, no record beyond one semester of enrollment. Everything else had been a mirage, carefully arranged lies, wrapped in just enough privilege to pass unexamined. Tanya had even included a voice memo, her usual brisk tone tinged with satisfaction. She's been using her mom's network to fake credential checks, Tanya said. Also, I talked to your cousin Avery. Apparently, Emily was back home for 2 years after that first semester claimed she was taking online classes, but never mentioned UCLA again. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. The weight of this wasn't just personal. It was proof. Proof that the pedestal Emily stood on had termites in the foundation. Across the room, Julian stirred in the doorway holding a mug of something herbal and unnecessary. "It's late," he said. "You okay?" "Define okay," I murmured, scanning the files again. "I'm just pruning the family tree." He didn't ask more. He set the mug down beside me, kissed the top of my head, and returned to bed, used to these late-night battles I fought in silence. I reopened an old audio folder, one I hadn't touched since Lily was born. The files were grainy, pulled from a cheap voice recorder I'd hidden in my coat pocket during one of my final nights at home. I pressed play. "You'll end up scrubbing toilets?" My father's voice sneered. "You think that degree will feed you? You'll be begging us to take you back in 6 months." I closed my eyes as the words hit dull and familiar. Not because they hurt anymore, but because they echoed a version of myself I no longer carried. The girl who needed to prove she could rise. The girl who once believed that family meant safety. I renamed the folder The Jonas Chronicles for emergency use. Then I printed every damning page, the transcript voids, the cousin's statement, Tanya's notes, screenshots, Emily's photo in Cancun. I hole-punched them into a crisp black binder and slid it into my bottom drawer. Not for revenge. For leverage. For balance. For the inevitable moment they tried to erase my story again. As I locked the drawer, my phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. Message. "You'll never belong, Claire. Stay out of this wedding." I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering above the screen. The font, the punctuation, it all screamed familiarity. Susan's tone in a digital disguise. I could smell the Chanel No. 5 through the passive aggression, but I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshot it, saved it in a new folder and titled it Preemptive Threats. Let them think I was poking around. Let them feel the tremor before the quake. Because roots this rotten, they always collapse eventually. The closer you get to the truth, the harder they try to pretend. The rooftop restaurant shimmered in late morning sun, all glass railings and panoramic views of the Seattle skyline, pretentious and cold like the people hosting brunch. A string quartet played something forgettable in the background, and the scent of expensive mimosas floated on the breeze like a perfume nobody asked for. The Jonas family brunch. A tradition. An illusion. I adjusted my sunglasses and walked onto the patio like I belonged, because I did whether they liked it or not. Claire Susan called with a voice that barely concealed her irritation. She waved with just 2 fingers. "Darling, over here, we saved you a seat. Away from the sun. Next to the kitchen doors." Naturally. I smiled anyway, nodded politely, and sat as if I didn't notice or care. Emily stood at the head of the table in a designer floral dress that clung too tightly, her smile too sharp. She held a champagne flute like it was a scepter. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, tapping her glass with a spoon. Everyone quieted instantly. The air tightened. "To family," she said sweetly, eyes scanning the table until they landed on me. "To those who supported us, and to those who almost made it. You know who you are." There it was. A sugar-coated knife to the ribs. Elegant, poisonous, practiced. Polite chuckles rippled. Paul smirked. Susan sipped her drink like nothing happened. I let the silence breathe, let the discomfort settle, then rose slowly and raised my own glass. "To resilience," I said calmly with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "To those who rose from where they were pushed down. To those who didn't need a perfect past to build a better future." The table went still. Someone cleared their throat. The quartet faltered slightly. Emily blinked, the corners of her mouth twitching, but she said nothing. Her grip on the champagne flute tightened. I sat down as if I hadn't just slapped her with silk gloves. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. After brunch, as guests began to drift toward the elevator or pose for rooftop selfies, Dylan approached me. He looked like he hadn't slept well, his usual calm replaced by something tighter, curious, cautious, almost unsettled. "Claire," he said, clearing his throat. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded and followed him to a quieter corner near the glass railing. He looked out at the skyline before speaking. "Can I ask you something? Personal?" "Go ahead." He hesitated. "Were you really kicked out? I mean, Emily said it was a misunderstanding, that you left to find yourself. But some things don't add up. And the way you talk about Seattle General, it just..." I studied him for a moment. He wasn't being accusatory. He was searching for clarity. And maybe for the first time he realized he might not be getting it from the woman he was marrying. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. Maybe I said softly, "You should ask your fiancée why she never showed you her degree." That was all. I left him there frozen, staring at the skyline like it had just shifted under his feet. As I walked back toward the table, I didn't need to look behind me to know Emily was watching. I could feel her eyes burning into my spine. She knew. Emily glares from across the room, reading Dylan's expression. She knows her time is running out. Everyone's perfect until you check the fine print. Dylan sat alone in his condo, the lights dim, the only illumination coming from the glow of his laptop and the skyline beyond the glass windows. His tie was loosened, collar open, sleeves rolled up, but none of it made him feel more relaxed. His whiskey sat untouched beside the keyboard. He stared at the open tabs. UCLA, hospital credentialing boards, a LinkedIn profile with suspiciously vague accomplishments. His cursor hovered over one search bar after another like he was afraid to ask the question he already knew the answer to. Emily wasn't home. She'd gone for a last-minute bridesmaid meeting that hadn't included any actual bridesmaids. When she kissed him goodbye earlier, he felt her lips twitch just slightly, but it was enough to twist something in his gut. Now that he'd started to look, everything felt off. The stories. The half-truths. The little inconsistencies she always brushed off with a laugh or a kiss. He clicked open an old email chain from their second-year dating when he'd asked if she wanted to join him at a UCLA alumni mixer. Her reply, too busy with work stuff. Plus, I never really clicked with that crowd. At the time, it hadn't mattered. Now it sounded like a shield. He went to the bookshelf where she kept their shared accomplishments on display. His degrees, his publications, a few framed photographs. But no diploma of hers, no certification, not even a fake. He opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, rifling through tax documents, insurance papers, real estate contracts. Nothing academic. Nothing even close. His phone buzzed on the table. Claire. Just one message. Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner is when the crack becomes a fracture. He didn't reply. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what he'd say. Another message popped up seconds later, this time from Tanya. Digital files uploaded to your drive, printed folders ready. Let me know if you want them dropped early. They weren't subtle. They didn't need to be anymore. He leaned back and rubbed his temples. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe Claire was bluffing, playing some grudge from years ago. But as he scrolled deeper into the digital archives Tanya had sent, it got harder to believe that. The UCLA medical ID database was simple enough. Faculty, graduates, fellows, residents, public access. He searched for Emily's name across 4 years, filtering by every possible spelling variation. Nothing. He pulled up the archived PDF yearbooks, page after page of smiling faces in navy gowns, honors degrees awards. No Emily Jonas. He sat frozen, staring at the screen, listening to the thrum of his own pulse. He didn't want this. Didn't ask for it. But here it was. Reality, uninvited, unavoidable. His hand hovered over the phone for several seconds. Then he pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Emily picked up. Hey babe, what's up? He didn't smile. Didn't stall. Where exactly did you graduate from? The line goes silent. They rehearsed perfection. I rehearsed exposure. The dining hall shimmered with exaggerated elegance, long tables dressed in ivory linens, crystal glasses aligned with obsessive precision, candles flickering like nervous lies. A string quartet played Vivaldi's Winter, an ironic choice given how tightly wound the air felt. Cold, formal, suffocating. I stepped in just behind the mother of the bride procession, unnoticed at first. Tanya, already seated near the back, gave the faintest nod. She blended in beautifully in a silver sheath dress, champagne in hand, eyes sharper than any blade in the room. Emily floated in late, of course, in a gown meant to whisper grace, but screamed control. Her smile tightened the second she spotted me. Claire, she purred as she air-kissed my cheek. You made it. Again. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, my voice velvet but steady. My clutch was heavier than usual by design. Inside 3 folders waited quietly. 1 for Dylan, 1 for the wedding officiant, 1 for a just-in-case moment. I didn't know which one tonight would demand, but I was ready for all of them. Dylan arrived 10 minutes later, looking polished on the surface, but off. His smile lacked its usual spark. His eyes kept drifting toward Emily and then away, like something sharp lay between them that neither wanted to touch. The dinner unfolded with robotic rhythm. Polite laughter, forced compliments, planned photo ops. Paul delivered a dry toast. Susan praised the power of forgiveness and family. The irony nearly suffocated me. Finally, Emily tapped her glass. To love, she began, beaming. To building a future on shared dreams and honest intentions. I nearly applauded. Then all eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, let the silence breathe. I raised my glass. To the beauty of truth, even when dressed in white. A few guests chuckled, not catching the double edge, but Emily did. Her smile froze, fingers tightening around her stemware. The glass wobbled slightly before she set it down. Across the table, Dylan said nothing. Tanya moved quietly, timing it perfectly. She rose, walked behind the table like she was just adjusting her chair, and slipped a small white envelope beneath Dylan's napkin as she passed. He noticed. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the top line, then the second, and the third. It was the transcript. A redacted official from UCLA's registrar confirming no degree granted to Emily Jonas. Enrollment terminated year 1. Attached a screenshot of her falsified credentials on a wedding vendor questionnaire. Dylan's hand dropped to his lap, holding the papers like they'd burned him. "I need a minute," he muttered, and stood folding the envelope under one arm. Emily watched him walk toward the exit. "Dylan," she called, but he didn't look back. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. The screen lit up with one message: "He knows." Her hand jerked. The phone slipped, hit the edge of her wine glass, and toppled into it with a splash. Gasps circled the table. She stared at the glass, stunned. Speechless for the first time all evening. I reached for my champagne and took a slow sip. Let the cracks keep spreading. They built the day like a machine. I only had to pull the right gear. The morning hummed with the efficiency of a factory floor, hairdryers roaring like turbines, makeup brushes flicking like pistons, planners barking schedules like foremen. Rose Hill Grand Hotel's bridal suite pulsed with artificial joy choreographed to perfection. And underneath it all, Emily's smile was cracking like cheap porcelain under pressure. She was everywhere and nowhere, snapping at the florists, micromanaging the DJ's playlist, triple confirming seat placements while pretending nothing was wrong. Dylan hadn't stayed the night before. His absence was a bruise she covered with foundation. Tanya and I arrived early, uninvited but not unexpected. She handled logistics. I carried pastries, fresh, warm, delicate, the kind that melt resistance. Dylan had agreed to the gesture when we spoke briefly the night before. He hadn't said much, just, "Bring the good stuff." Claire's Catering had its logo stamped discreetly on every delivery box. Beneath each pastry, tiny tags with handwritten quotes: "Truth never damages a cause that is just. Let them eat lies and choke." The guests laughed at the cleverness. Some read them aloud. A few, I noticed, didn't find them funny at all. Susan intercepted me in the hallway outside the suite. Her smile was sweet poison. "Claire," she breathed. "I think perhaps today isn't the best day for your brand of drama. Could we agree on a little peace?" "Of course," I said. "I came to feed people, not starve attention." She seemed relieved for a half-second. I reached into my handbag and handed her a business card. "In case you need catering in your next life." Susan blinked. Then the tension in her jaw gave her away. Across the room, Emily was pretending to chat with her stylist, but her eyes kept flicking toward me. She was sweating under her silk robe, foundation gathering around her mouth. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired, paranoid. Tanya whispered something to one of the hotel techs, passing off a USB drive like it was a party favor. "Hey," I heard Dylan's voice near the back hall. He wasn't smiling. Susan turned to him, face practiced. "Darling, there's so much to do. I just have one question," he said softly, close enough that others couldn't hear. "Did you help fake Emily's academic records?" Susan froze. Her hand stayed midair, still holding a makeup brush she'd picked up reflexively. She didn't answer. Her pupils shrank slightly, but that was all I needed. "Maybe you should get back to the ceremony prep," she said, finally, voice distant. I passed behind them, offering Dylan a cup of coffee. Extra strong. He took it silently. Emily was pacing now, phone to her ear, whispering urgently to someone. Tanya returned to my side, her smile small but satisfied. She leaned in close. "The minister's mic is connected to the main hall. Ready when you are. If they won't tell the truth, I'll let them walk right into it." The scent of roses was so dense it felt weaponized. Bouquets framed the marble altar, their petals arranged with militant precision. Rows of white chairs curved toward the stage like spectators waiting for a verdict. Somewhere beneath the surface, 100 moving parts ticked in synchrony: ushers, techs, florists, musicians. A machine still running but vibrating under its own pressure. I was backstage near the catering setup when a junior planner rushed over. Ms. Jonas, Ms. Claire, she corrected quickly. Emily asked if you could assist with a food placement issue. Something about the dessert tower not aligning with the backdrop subtle. Stupid. Of course, I said. Emily was already there, arms crossed, whispering viciously to one of the servers. You're not listed as catering lead anymore, she said when I approached. You really should go. I smiled. You're right. I'm not the lead today. I'm the guest of honor. She narrowed her eyes. You're not funny. No, I agreed. But this is about to be. The call to be seated rang out. A soft chime of bell tones, a hush rippling through the venue. I walked past her up the short staircase onto the ceremonial platform still empty. I stopped mid-stage, leaned slightly toward the microphone, and looked out over the crowd of perfectly dressed strangers and family ghosts. Before we begin, I said warmly, can we take a moment to honor the bride's incredible journey to a woman who earned her place through sheer determination, brilliance, and education? A woman who holds a degree from one of the top institutions in the country, and never once let adversity stop her. The guests clapped. Some stood to cheer. Paul even nodded. Emily froze just beyond the archway, her expression tight. Yeah, thank you, she muttered as she stepped into the aisle, bouquet trembling. And then the music cut. Not silence, but static. Then, okay, so no. I didn't technically finish UCLA, but it's not like I need a diploma to plan a wedding. Dylan barely even asked. The voice echoed through the entire hall. Hers. Casual. Arrogant. The kind of voice that believed the world would always protect her. Everyone lies on resumes. It's not like anyone checks, especially if you look the part. And come on, Claire's the cautionary tale, not me. Gasps exploded around the room. Some guests stood up. Others sat in stunned silence. One older woman let out a faint, "Oh my God." Paul stepped back like he'd been shot. Susan's knees buckled. A planner tried to catch her, but she fainted into a folding chair with a sound like soft collapse. Dylan stood center stage, his face unreadable. He looked at Emily, then at me. Then he stepped down from the platform and walked out the front doors without saying a word. Tanya stood near the AV table, serene, her hand still near the master volume slider. Emily's mic screeched as she stepped too close to the speaker, then fell silent. She turned toward me, hair fraying at the edges, lipstick faded. You planned this all along. No, I said, eyes steady. You planned your wedding. I just planned the honesty. She wanted a fairy tale. I gave her the truth, chapter and verse. The lounge smelled like wilted flowers and cheap Prosecco. The reception had emptied out like a crime scene. No music, no murmurs, just the soft tick of a vintage clock mounted above the fireplace. Someone had dropped a wine glass near the buffet. Its stem lay cracked red, splattered like evidence. Paul was waiting inside, jacket off, tie loose, fury held beneath skin like heat under steel. I stepped in slowly, not hesitant, just deliberate. The click of my heels on marble felt louder than any of the lies we'd grown up with. Claire, he said. His voice tried for calm but came out strained, like he wasn't sure if he was angry, ashamed, or just tired of the cleanup. He gestured to a small envelope on the table. I don't want this to become uglier than it has to be. You think it's ugly now? I asked, taking a seat across from him without touching the envelope. I've barely opened the file. His jaw twitched. Your mother thought if we offered you a gesture, it might help you move on. From what? The truth, he exhaled harshly. From whatever vendetta you think justifies blowing up your sister's life. I laughed. Not hard, just enough to echo. You think this is about Emily, I said. This isn't just about her. It's about everything you allowed. Every time you looked away. Every time you told me I was difficult instead of gifted. Every time you let Mom weaponize love and call it protection. He shifted. Your mother. She I cut in was never the strategist. You were. You funded the fiction. You reinforced it every time you praised Emily for a paper she didn't write, or ignored a transcript she never earned. His expression hardened. I tried to protect the family. No. You tried to protect your reputation, and you failed. He stood now towering the way he used to when I was 16, and still thought height meant authority. I gave you a roof, and you threw it away. No, I said, standing to match him. You gave me a cage and called it shelter. I didn't throw it away. I walked out. Behind us, the door creaked open. Julian stepped in quietly, Lily in his arms. She was wearing a tiny velvet dress, her hair in curls, holding a small toy fox. Tanya lingered in the hallway, giving us space. I reached for them, instinctively pressing my lips to Lily's forehead. Paul watched like he was seeing something impossible. A family not built by blood but by choice. You don't need us anymore, he said finally. No, I answered. And that's the most honest thing you've ever said. I turned to Julian, holding Lily close as her fingers tangled in my hair. Paul's hand twitched once toward the envelope, but he didn't offer it again. I used to dream about you apologizing, I said, walking toward the door. Now I know silence is the only apology I'll ever get. Just before I stepped out, I turned back one last time. You told me to be independent. I became more. I became free. As I crossed the lobby past shattered centerpieces and lipstick-smeared napkins, I felt the weight of 9 years leave me like fog lifting from the street after rain. Tanya waved from the other side of the atrium. Lily giggled and wiggled out of Julian's arms, trotting a few steps ahead to greet her. As we passed a guest near the coat check, I caught a whisper. That was her, the sister, damn. Secrets are loudest when silence falls. The ballroom was no longer dressed for celebration. Crystal chandeliers flickered overhead, casting fractured light over shattered glass and stiff smiles. Guests huddled near cocktail tables, murmuring as if trying not to disturb a crime scene. At the front of the room, Dylan stood behind the microphone. Not as a groom. Not anymore. I didn't know, he said, voice trembling, but not from uncertainty. But I know now. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The absence of music, of movement, gave every syllable a stage. I believed in a woman who told me half a story. The other half was delivered. Just moments ago. Publicly. Emily was frozen beside him, her cheeks blotched with rage, her eyes darting between guests, between threats. She stepped forward like someone drowning in her own veil. This is a setup, she spat, voice shrill. Claire has always been jealous. She doctored that file. Dylan shook his head slowly. It came straight from UCLA. I called myself Emily. The room inhaled. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. She looked to Susan, who finally detached herself from Paul and stepped forward like a stage mother rescuing a flailing child. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan began, her tone syrupy but unsteady. This has been a deeply unfortunate misunderstanding. But let's remember what today is about: love, forgiveness. It's about lies, Claire said, stepping from the edge of the room. She didn't raise her voice either. But somehow, the crowd parted for her. I didn't come here to expose anyone. I came because I was invited. She glanced at Emily, then to the guests. But since we're on the subject, she continued. Let me be clear. When I was 18, I asked my parents for help to go to college, to build a future. They said no. They said, be independent. And when I tried, they threw me out. Silence rippled through the hall. Some gasped. Others lowered their eyes. Claire turned slightly, her voice steady. I built my life from scratch. I earned my degree. I started my own company. I got married. I raised a daughter. And today, I'm standing here because I made it anyway. Emily's fists curled at her sides. Susan looked ready to object, but Paul placed a hand on her wrist. Not to comfort, but to stop her. Dylan placed the microphone on the stand and turned. For a moment, Claire thought he might say something, an apology, a farewell. Instead, he gave her a small nod and walked straight down the aisle between the chairs, past the photographer who'd stopped filming long ago, past the cake now beginning to lean. No one moved to stop him. Emily ran a hand through her hair, mascara smudged like cracks in porcelain. Dylan, Dylan, wait. But his footsteps echoed away, uninterrupted, unchased. Claire didn't watch him go. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked toward Tanya, who stood at the back of the room, tablet in hand, already cataloging the next phase. Guests whispered all around them now in louder tones. Questions, theories, the flick of phones turning back on. One man leaned closer to Tanya, his press badge tucked just under his lapel. Is this story public yet? Even broken glass shows a reflection. I closed the door to my hotel suite, slowly letting the soft click echo like punctuation to a day that had spoken too loudly. My heels came off first, kicked aside like armor no longer needed. The silence settled in around me, thicker than any Seattle fog. A crisp white envelope waited on the floor, slipped under the door while I was out. No name, no seal. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure if I was ready to open anything else today. But curiosity had always been my first betrayal. Inside were photos, real ones, printed on old Kodak paper. Edges, yellowed, corners, curled. My hands shook as I thumbed through them. There we were, Emily and I, in matching sundresses, laughing beside a sprinkler in our backyard. Susan crouching behind us, arms outstretched. Paul, rare smile caught mid-flash, holding a popsicle like a trophy. Another shot, Christmas morning. I was 10, Emily 8, both of us in flannel pajamas. The bow on Emily's gift was bigger than her head. I was mid-eye roll. She was mid-cackle. I sat down at the edge of the bed, pictures spread like tarot cards across the comforter. What future had these images predicted? Certainly not this one. The quiet buzz of my phone broke the stillness. Julian. I answered on speaker, my voice steadier than I felt. Hey. You okay? His voice was low, gentle, like he knew the answer. I think I just time traveled. There are photos of me and Emily, back when we still shared more than a last name. He exhaled softly. She's unraveling, Claire. That envelope wasn't a peace offering. It's emotional warfare. Maybe. Or maybe it's guilt. There was a pause. Then, and how do you feel? That question landed heavier than the photos. I glanced at the full-length mirror across from the bed. My reflection looked tired, but not broken. Torn, I said finally. I don't miss them. I miss who I thought they were. Julian didn't fill the silence. He let me sit in it, let me bleed in peace. After we hung up, I stared at the mirror again. It held the room perfectly, the shadows, the soft lamplight, the photos, and me, centered alone. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the cool glass. My breath fogged a soft oval over my face. It reminded me of being 14, sneaking into Susan's bathroom to try on her lipstick. I'd left a kiss mark on the mirror. She'd slapped me when she saw it. Don't pretend you're grown, she'd snapped. You don't even know who you are yet. But I had known. I wanted more. I wanted out. My phone chimed again. Not a text this time, but a file from Tanya. A recovered voicemail. Dated 2 years after I left. Susan's voice came through, slightly crackled like memory itself. Claire was always too much, too ambitious. It was easier to cut her out. I closed my eyes as the recording ended. No anger rose, just clarity. They didn't hate me. They feared I'd outgrow them. And I had. The mirror caught a shimmer, my wedding ring, a soft glint as I brushed a tear away. I wasn't crying for them. I was crying for the girl who once believed their love was unconditional. My phone buzzed again. Incoming call, Emily. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. The cafe across from the hotel had the quiet dignity of a place that didn't ask questions. The barista greeted me with a polite nod, not recognition, and the early morning crowd murmured low over half-filled mugs and newspapers. Emily was already seated when I arrived. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, strands escaping in every direction. The designer coat she wore yesterday was replaced by a simple hoodie, sleeves pulled over her hands like she was trying to disappear into them. Her eyes were swollen, mascara streaked. She looked like someone who had cried herself to sleep and woken up to find the nightmare still there. Tanya had texted me just 30 minutes earlier. She asked for a meeting. Your call. I had almost said no. Almost. Emily looked up as I approached, and for the first time in a decade she didn't meet me with sharpness. There was no smirk, no veiled threat behind her smile, just exhaustion. Hi, she said, voice brittle. I sat across from her. Hi. Neither of us reached for the menu. Neither of us needed coffee. The silence stretched, but I let it. I wanted her to speak first. I didn't fake the degree to hurt you, she said finally, staring at the chipped edge of her mug. I did it because I couldn't live in your shadow anymore. The words sat there raw and unfiltered. I didn't reply. Not right away. I watched her trying to read between the lines. Was this a setup, a guilt trip? But no, this wasn't calculated. This was surrender. I was the golden child, she went on, still not looking at me. Until you got into college. Until you had a plan. You made it out and I froze. They said it was your fault. That you were ungrateful. But they were scared. They saw you leaving and realized I'd never do the same. You could've, I said quietly. You still can. Emily let out a dry laugh. What? Go back to school at 30? Reinvent myself? I wouldn't even know where to start. You start by stopping the lie, I said, voice steady. Which I guess you already did. She looked up at me then. Her eyes weren't angry. They were empty. I hated you for a long time, Claire. I know. And now? I'm not sure what I feel. That's okay, I said. I'm not here for your guilt, Emily. I just needed the truth. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim manila folder, sliding it across the table. Her hand trembled slightly. It's the withdrawal form, she said. The joint investment Dad tried to rope us both into. I'm out. You were right not to sign it. I opened the folder, briefly scanned the document. Legal withdrawal notarized. Clean. No theatrics. I won't be their puppet anymore, Emily added, voice cracking. You never had to be, I said gently. She stood then, leaving her half-finished coffee untouched. For a moment I thought she might say something else, an apology, a final jab, anything. But she didn't. She just walked away. I sat there for a while, unsure if I felt lighter or just numb. The sun had begun to filter through the window, soft and golden, catching the steam off the mugs like halos. Then I noticed it. Tucked beneath her untouched cup, folded once and weighed down by a napkin, was a small note. I unfolded it slowly. You won. I hope that means something. Some burdens weren't ours to carry. We just didn't know how to let go. The rain returned like it always did in Seattle, quietly, respectfully, as if the sky understood it was interrupting something sacred. I stood at the living room window, the city lights blurring into watercolor through the misty glass. Somewhere behind me, Lily's laughter spilled like wind chimes. She was on the carpet, cradling an old stuffed bear I hadn't seen in years. Where did you find that? I asked gently. In the box in your closet, she replied, without looking up. He was hiding. The bear was faded and stitched at the neck, its once fluffy fur worn thin from childhood fingers. I hadn't realized I'd kept it. I hadn't realized she'd chosen today to find it. Julian walked in with 2 mugs of tea, placing one on the side table beside me. You okay? I nodded, but the kind that meant not yet. We sat on the couch, knees brushing. I wrapped my hands around the mug like it could ground me. Tell me everything, he said. No edits this time. So I did. The cafe. The withdrawal form. Emily's voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. The note. You won. How those words still felt too heavy for a trophy I never asked for. Julian listened without interrupting the way he always had. By the end, the tea was cold. I'm thinking of leaving, I said softly. Seattle. The company can run remote. I want space. Space from them, he asked. No. Space for me. He reached over and took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. Then we'll go. Lily climbed onto my lap, still clutching the bear. Mommy, she said, curling into me. Are you happy now? The question landed in a place I hadn't opened in a long time. I didn't answer right away. I held her closer, inhaled the scent of her hair, felt the beat of her heart pressed against mine. I am now, I whispered. Julian didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, and the apartment quieted into the rhythm of rain and radiator clicks, I pulled the envelope from my bag. My father's handwriting hadn't changed. Sharp, commanding, arrogant even in ink. Inside was a letter, not an apology, of course. A proposal, he called it. A new business deal. A family trust restructured. A chance to rebuild bridges. I read it once, then once more slower. Each line weighed with the same hollow gravity his voice always carried. Here's what I'll allow you to have. I walked to the kitchen. Julian didn't follow. The letter crumpled easily in my fist. I flattened it again, laid it in the stainless steel sink, struck a match, and let it burn. The flame caught quickly, curling the corners, blackening his name first. Ash swirled, then disappeared down the drain with a hiss from the tap. I watched until the last ember faded. That was the real win. Not the wedding, not the withdrawal, not the public undoing. This. Letting go. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Tanya Media wants to publish the story. You ready? Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. Here's to the ones who walked away and the ones who never looked back. The last of the sun melted into gold behind the Seattle skyline, casting the rooftop in a warm hush of twilight. String lights blinked gently overhead, suspended like tiny stars, and the table glowed with the soft flicker of candles nestled between platters of slow-roasted vegetables, fresh oysters, and lemon tarts dusted with powdered sugar. It was intimate, just how I'd wanted. 10 guests, no speeches, no photographers, no performance. Just people who had stayed when others hadn't. Julian stood beside me, his hand grazing mine under the tablecloth. Tanya sat across from us, wineglass in one hand, the other tapping quietly against her thigh like she was holding back a surprise. The reporter, who'd once been a +1 and was now a trusted friend, leaned in to speak with one of our earliest clients. Every conversation hummed with the kind of ease you only find after surviving the noise. 5 years, Julian said softly. I nodded. It doesn't feel real. Maybe that's what makes it so real. I stood and raised my glass, the stem cool between my fingers. To independence, I began. The group hushed, eyes turning toward me. When I was younger, someone once told me, be independent. I paused, letting the words settle. So I did. I left. I rebuilt. I survived. But no one ever said it would be this beautiful. A few people smiled. Tanya let out the quietest mum of agreement. I didn't do this alone, I continued, but I did it on my own terms. And for that, I'm grateful. We raised our glasses. A soft clink followed, and then quiet laughter as someone reached too far and knocked over a spoon. I sat back down, feeling the weight in my chest shift lighter, not gone, but different. Tanya pulled a small wrapped package from beneath her chair and slid it across the table toward me. What's this? I asked. A gift, she said, but also proof. I unwrapped it slowly. A hardbound print article, glossy cover. The title glinted under the lights, The Independent Daughter, a story of quiet power. Below it was a photo, me candid, not posing, not polished. I was standing outside the catering office with Lily in my arms and flour on my shirt. Real. This isn't about scandal, Tanya said. We took the angle you wanted, truth, growth, strength. And if you're ready, it can go wide tomorrow. The reporter beside her leaned forward, tone gentle. There's interest. National outlets. But you don't have to say yes. You've already said enough. I looked down at the title again, ran my fingers across the spine. Let's print it, I said. But don't call it revenge. Call it resilience. Tanya raised her glass wordlessly. Dinner went on slower now. Dessert arrived. The air cooled and someone brought out blankets. Lily, now awake from her nap, curled into my lap and whispered sleepily, I like your party. I kissed the top of her head. Me too. As the last of the guests lingered by the railing, the knock came. A soft, measured rap at the rooftop door. Julian looked at me, brow raised. Expecting someone? No, I said. He opened it. A hotel attendant stood there holding a single delivery box. Inside, nestled carefully against tissue paper, was a single white rose. No card, no note. Just the flower. Tanya looked over, then the reporter. Questions began to form. But I already knew. I smiled, not surprised, not shaken. Just sure.